The following program is an interview and discussion whose sole purpose was to better understand, from a cultural perspective, an unprecedented and what may prove to be historic situation as it was unfolding. Neither the producer, nor the host, nor the guest are financial services professionals. Nothing in this episode should be interpreted as investment advice. No investment decision should be made from listening to the content of this program. Listeners should always practice their own careful due diligence before making any investment decision. You're listening to Interview Time. On December 30th, 2020, the stock price of fading video game retailer GameStop was valued at $18.84 a share. By January 28th, 2021, fueled by amateur investors leveraging social media and commission-free trades via the addictive game-like investment app Robinhood, the stock price had risen 1,700% to an all-time high of $483 a share, briefly making the company, once popular with millennials for selling used video game cartridges and shopping malls, more valuable than Delta Airlines, and leveling tens of billions of dollars of losses to several high-profile Wall Street hedge funds. My guest, JustinHorn, an academic philosopher, became an early investor in GameStop after following the compelling research posted on a bawdy retail investment subreddit called wallstreetbets by a user named deepfuckingvalue, who had bet his entire $53,000 life savings that the hedge funds had exposed themselves to a short squeeze by short selling roughly 140% of its shares. In this episode, Horn and I examine the underlying thesis of the GameStop trade, discuss its narrative, political, and historical dimensions, and explore the potentially fatal consequences of our society's relationship with risk. JustinHorn, welcome to Interview Time.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
GameStop closed out the week with a valuation of $67.60 per share, and this is down from an all-time high last week of approximately $483 per share. That is quite a drop from last week. Are you still holding on to your stock in GameStop right now?
I still have a position in GameStop, yeah. And although I'd like to point out that even down to what did it close at? $60?
$67.60.
$67.60 is still up almost $30 from its previous all-time high of around $38 prior to the GameStop short squeeze madness that's been going on over the past a few weeks.
Why are you continuing to hold?
Well, and again, I just want to emphasize that in our conversation here, I'm not encouraging anybody to take any particular position on anything. But I continue to hold because I continue to be confident in the original due diligence research, which I first encountered on the Wall Street Bets subreddit months ago.
What is the essential thesis behind the GameStop trade strategy?
I think it breaks down into there are two different theses in play with regard to GameStop, and both of these have been the subject of numerous posts on Wall Street Bets for months. One thesis is about the number of short positions taken on this stock and the fact that, for months, it's been like the most heavily shorted stock in the stock market. And as has been widely reported, it at some recent point had 140% of the shares in the float sold short, that seems like a lot. It is a lot by any historical measure. That's That's a lot of shares shorted.
Maybe you could step in and just explain briefly for my audience what a short sell is and how it works.
If when you're talking about long and short, and again, none of this is financial advice. I'm not a financial expert. I'm an academic philosopher. I teach critical thinking, and I invest some of my money in the stock market. And I happen to be fortunate enough to have my eyes on this community and be in position to be a part of this thing from, you know, not the very beginning, but certainly before all of the fireworks
Right.
that we've seen over the past few weeks. So if you have a long position in a stock, that means you think that the stock is going to rise in value over time. And what you do is you buy shares of the stock at a lower price now, expecting that they will go up in the future, and you will sell them at a higher price at some future point, pocketing the difference as a profit. When you take a short position, then you are assuming that the value of the shares is going to go down in the future. So what you do is you borrow shares of the stock from typically from the clearinghouse, and you sell them immediately. And you promise the owner of the stock, whose stock you've borrowed and sold, that you're going to return those shares that you borrowed at some future time, and hopefully the value of the shares will fall, and the short seller can then buy the shares back at a cheaper price than they sold them for, pocketing the difference. Now,
Right.
of course, because they're engaging in a loan here, they're also paying interest on the borrowed shares,
Right.
and the interest that they owe fluctuates with the value of the shares.
Right.
So what's happened here is that there have been so many borrowings and resellings of the stock here that basically the short positions, at least when the shares were shorted 140% of the float, that means that they've borrowed every share of stock available, and then they reborrowed another 40% of them again, and all of these.
So wait a minute. So there's a double borrow going on. It's like you borrowed it, but somebody else wants to get in on this as well, so they're going to borrow it again to create more.
So I mean, there need be nothing sinister going on there. I mean, it's like if A holds the shares of the stock and B is a short seller, I can borrow the share from A and sell it to some guy C at market price now, but then I could then again borrow the share from C, who's now holding it, and sell it to D.
Right.
And so that's what's gone on here, basically, is you have lots and lots of borrowing the shares and selling them short.
With this in mind, what is the essential thesis then of the GameStop trade?
So again, as I said, there's two theses in play. One is that the stock has been massively overshorted, and you got to remember, when you are short selling the stock, when you borrow that stock and sell it, when you add selling pressure to the market and you had more people selling, that drives the price of the stock down. That's just simple supply and demand. And so if you have all of this short selling, and the bigger that percentage of the float gets, the more of an effect this has. That all that short selling drives the value of the stock downward. So these guys thought, one, there's way too many shorts on this stock. This is ludicrously overshorted. They also thought that
these are the guys on wallstreetbets.
The guys on wallstreetbets. They also caught wind pretty early on of Ryan Cohen beginning to acquire shares in GameStop. Ryan Cohen, for those of you who aren't tracking this, is a billionaire investor who formerly took Chewy.com, an online retail e-commerce business focusing on pet supplies, and he turned that into a $3.5 billion business, which he sold to PetSmart, and is now a multi-billionaire. Well, he hadn't really been doing anything with most of his capital until all of a sudden, in, I believe, early 2020, he started to purchase shares of GameStop more and more and more. And
I think he purchased 9 million shares of GameStop, and at $76 million, which amounted to 10% of the company.
So he was then the largest retail shareholder of GameStop. And these guys on Wall Street Bets, caught wind of this. And they also noticed that Ryan Cohen had written a letter to the board of directors at GameStop earlier this year saying, your brand has real value here, and there's real potential for you guys to, have a successful future, but you need to radically overhaul your business model, and you need to leave behind this brick and mortar cartridge reselling, model that is the reason that everybody was shorting you in the first place.
Yeah.
And reimagine your entire business as a digital first, 21st century e-commerce business, looking into, partnering with esports and finding new ways to be part of this burgeoning video game industry.
Deepfuckingvalue, he put his life savings, I think, that's the folk tale right now, is that he fronted $53,000, his total life savings, into this investment. Was that before or after Ryan Cohen got involved?
I'm not sure, but I want to say that I think it might have even been before.
Right.
And I also think it's worth pointing out that Deepfuckingvalue for months took a lot of heat from other members of the Wall Street Bets community.
Right.
And he's, he would regularly post updates on how his bet was going so far, as he's just ridden this out for the last year and a half. And he'll post his updates and people will just be like, dude, you're going to get destroyed. And he's like, well, thanks. And, that's not what I think, but
right.
We'll see what happens. And,
right.
Other people started to, on Wall Street Bets, started paying attention to subreddit and digging around and finding out about Ryan Cohen writing this letter to the board and theorizing that Ryan Cohen was going to try to basically become the leadership of GameStop. That's what these guys thought was going to happen.
And it kind of makes sense. He's an e-commerce guy. So he's saying, hey, I want to convert GameStop into an e-commerce business. I want to pivot it into the 21st century.
Right. So
video games are definitely not going anywhere, and I have the brand recognition here. So this is, just to get kind of specifically back in, you said there are two theses here. Right. So the first thesis is that this is massively overshorted, and it's because this guy Ryan,
and Ryan Cohen coming in may be able to affect a massive overhaul in the business model. And this guy has a trained or a proven track record of delivering successful online retail businesses. And
I would say also a traditionally brick and mortar style of business. I mean, if you think about your local pet store, I don't think a lot of people necessarily, it's a brick and mortar kind of style business. It has been, I think.
Yeah. Well, but and he's looking at, like, look, we can disrupt that business by turning this all into online distribution and taking advantage of all this technology that we have now, that a lot of these old retail models from the 20th century still, haven't kind of caught up to. And
Right.
by taking advantage of that stuff, there's real potential to turn that company's fortunes around. So that was kind of part one of the thesis.
So that's part one thesis. And just to cut in here,
GameStop could be, a turnaround story here. And with the leadership of Ryan Cohen, they might not be a brick and mortar video game cartridge reseller doomed to failure.
They certainly don't have to be. Yeah.
Right.
So, which would say if you don't have to be, but you're shorted at 140%, what were the hedge fund guys doing through this? Because you can't tell me they don't know Ryan Cohen's not coming onto the board. These guys are professionals. I mean, we don't know. But.
I mean, again, I don't know what the hedge funds were thinking or why they did what they did. But if you ask me, it seems like they obviously didn't know about the impact of Ryan Cohen coming onto the board and what that could do to the sentiment on that particular stock. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had 140% of the float shorted.
Maybe, I mean, we don't know.
It seems, yeah. I mean, my speculation is just that they saw a company, they go, this company sells used video game cartridges in brick and mortar stores, mostly in malls, right? Video games are going away from cartridges altogether. And nowadays, people download their video games directly to their console or their computer. And you don't even have to go to a store to buy the game. So it seems like, on the face of it, GameStop is screwed. Like, this is like the easiest short in the universe, right? These guys don't even have to do any research. All they have to do is think about it for 30 seconds and decide, okay, I'm going to short GameStop, and I'm never even going to look at it again because it seems so obvious it's going to fail.
And nobody else is going to be paying attention to this. Like, I think that's a factor here. It's sort of assuming that, like, oh, no one else will think, No,
well, it certainly seems like they assumed that nobody was going to pay attention to the fact that they had sold that stock short so heavily.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even professional investors. I mean, I just saw an interview with Kathy Wood where she was like, I didn't even know you could sell short a stock 140% of the float. And so I think that's opening a lot of people's eyes on how underregulated short selling is. And I do think that, I don't want to make short selling illegal. And I don't think that's right. I mean, I do think short sellers have a market function to provide. They, can help expose companies that are, hiding things about their company that really mean that it is being overvalued, and they can expose weaknesses where there are weaknesses. And insofar as they do that, that's fine. But when you have companies and hedge funds that short sell these companies so heavily that it is just artificially crushing them, it limits their access to capital, it turns it into this self-fulfilling prophecy of that destroys them. And the worst part is, if they they know that if they have all these extra shares shorted, right, they've borrowed shares multiple times to sell short. If the company goes bankrupt and those shares go to zero, they never have to pay back the people that they borrowed those shares from. So they basically get like totally free profit on borrowing stuff that they never have to pay back.
And never owned in the first place.
Right.
Certainly. But I get your point. But yeah, it's
those kind of practices, in my opinion, are, it's long past time that we make some reforms here, because that it should be legal for that many short positions to be open, more than there are shares of the stock,
Yes.
something ought to be done.
So what's the second thesis?
So the other thesis, the other kind of half of the thesis here, besides that GameStop might have a brighter future than most people would predict on the face of it, is the idea that these short positions being stacked up so heavily makes them vulnerable for what's called a short squeeze, in which the all these short positions get in trouble if people start buying the stock and driving the price up. Because as the price goes up, the interest that the short positions have to pay to remain open in their position, that is to say, to avoid having to buy the shares back at the current market price to return them, they got to keep paying interest. And the higher those share prices go, the higher the interest payments go. So as the value of the underlying stock rises, that causes the interest payments that the short positions have to pay for having borrowed the shares. Those interest payments go up. And this is when you've seen in the news about the reports of Melvin Capital losing billions of dollars or whatever. That's what they're losing billions of dollars to, is the interest payments they have to pay every day to remain open on their short positions. Now, you get a short squeeze when those interest payments get so high that the loaners of the share no longer are, when the borrowers no longer have enough collateral to maintain having those shares on loan, and they basically get forced to buy them back at that point to return them. And that buying action drives the price of the stock up even further. And then as that goes further, other short positions also get margin called and also get forced to buy back the stock. And you get this kind of cascading reverse avalanche where the price of the stock just goes up and up and up very, very quickly as all of the short positions are forced to close their positions and buy the stock at whatever the market price is, which just rises as you just have this flood of sellers entering the market, and buyers are sitting there just waiting to absorb them and naming their price and getting it paid. And the price of the stock briefly skyrockets. But yeah, that's what's called a short squeeze, when you have this forced cascade of buying from people in short positions.
How would you describe the culture of Wall Street bets? And how is that culture, let's say, or how has that community, or whatever you would describe it, how has it evolved since you first started engaging with it a few months ago?
So it's fascinated me from the moment that I discovered it. I mean, let's just say the language is colorful.
Right.
The memes are high quality. And the members of this community have an appetite for risk like the most degenerate Vegas gamblers that you've ever seen. I mean, these guys will throw down $1 million on a single stock bet or more. I mean, like, I'm sure you can find 1 million YouTube 5 top YOLO bets on Wall Street Bets of people just blowing jaw-dropping, eye-popping fortunes on a single stock bet and losing it all, or tripling it up. I mean, just insane appetite for risk. Right. Nothing that is anything like responsible investing. And that's another misunderstanding of that subreddit, is while you do see a lot of very interesting and well-researched due diligence posts in there with ideas about stocks. You also have, just some of the most like don't try this at home kind of moves
Right.
that you could make on the stock market. And it's like, let these guys do it so you can watch and just be amazed.
Yeah.
And they'll post their gains and losses either way. But this culture does have a uniquely high appetite for risk and for trying crazy stuff. And I'll tell you, if you told anybody that a group of disorganized Reddit internet investors from a message board are gonna, without any kind of top-down organization or planning, take aim at a group of hedge funds and bleed them for tens of billions of dollars over the course of a couple of weeks. Like, no one would ever have believed that, 2 months ago. But these guys did it. And I guess I was one of them, because I've had a position in GameStop open since mid-December of last year, and based entirely on the research I found in that subreddit. I thought the research looked good to me, and then I saw, I just became more and more confident as I watched like the prognostications that these Redditors had made come true one after another, as though they had a crystal ball. December 21st, Ryan Cohen increases his stake by another 30%. Next thing you know, him and two of his former Chewy executives are named to the GameStop board of directors, which is shrinking from 14 to 9 members. So he now controls basically a third of the board of directors. And a week later, the stock starts to jump. And then it jumps higher and higher. And you see, it doesn't take long before the word gets out, and you can't have a stock move as much as that stock did without people on Wall Street going, what the hell is going on with this GameStop stock? And from there, it's just been this snowball of retail attention, and it's just this perfect storm of a catalyst that triggers this whole turnaround in the company and launches the stock off, a plan by these guys to target these short positions on Wall Street and bleed them. And then that just happens to be in today's political climate, where you still have most of America who can very distinctly remember how, Wall Street destroyed their financial futures and their savings and retirements back in 2008 in the housing crisis. And they were bailed out, and they never had to pay back a cent of those bailouts. And there were no bailouts for the people, on Main Street. And, I've also seen a lot of media reports describe this as some kind of, crazy Dutch tulip mania situation, saying that this is, it's just a greater fool theory going on, that everybody thinks they're going to be able to sell it at a higher price to some greater fool. Well, any reports that are saying that are, one, totally misunderstanding what a short squeeze is and what the Reddit horde is trying to do. And are some retail investors going to get wrecked getting involved in this, having no idea what they're doing and just hopping on what seems like a popular bandwagon? Yeah, well, but nobody should ever do that. And nobody's encouraged anybody to do that here. So, I feel sorry for people that do that, but, that's too bad. But what you really do have here is a lot of people who are buying into this, paying what they know to be exorbitant prices for GameStop stock based on the company's fundamental valuations, but they're doing it because they think that they can send a message, that they can hurt Wall Street by doing it.
Right.
And whether that's true or not, the fact that that message has been able to galvanize so much retail investors uncovers this undercurrent of anger from everyday Americans toward Wall Street. I mean, like you've seen in the memes across the internet for the last couple of weeks, you know, that nobody really is sad for the hedge funds here. Like
Certainly
nobody's
not.
sad for the rich guys on Wall Street that are losing a few bucks to retail for once.
Right.
But this is no kidding a historic moment. And
Yeah.
a big part of the reason that I remain deeply involved in this, even, you know, knowing that I'm eating 90% losses on that GameStop positions I took that week. Ooh,
Yeah.
that was a beating.
Yeah.
That was a serious beating. But this is going to go down in history. I mean, this is, Kathy Wood called this the greatest intergenerational transfer of wealth in history.
Right.
From, you know, from the boomers to the millennials. But let's not forget that really that's also probably the greatest transfer of wealth from the upper class and the wealthy of America to the middle and lower class. Because I mean, what if you look at a generational transfer of wealth from boomers to millennials, like the millennials have had, you know, shackles on, economic shackles on for their entire lives, and are the most kind of behind generation in terms of being able to get good earnings and good financial futures going. They've been handicapped from the start. And so this play has moved a lot of money into millennial hands, and those hands are largely not hands that had a lot of money before.
I think many people see this GameStop phenomenon as a revolution, or at least as some kind of protest movement. And I wanted to ask you how you think this situation compares to the Occupy Wall Street situation that happened roughly a decade ago.
If you ask me, I think the most important thing to recognize here is that this is a very complicated situation, and there's a lot of people in it and a lot of people out of it for a variety of reasons. There are some people who are in this to stick it to the man. There are some people who are in this because they want a dream lottery ticket to get them out of, you know, their financial predicaments. There are other people who are in this that think that they can prey on other people that are taking certain positions in respect to this trade. You know, there's no shortage of different reasons that people are taking these actions. But I do think that there is a much bigger than you might think, and probably bigger than in any other trade in history, any other stock trade. It's very unusual for politics to come into it in this way, where people are literally treating their market actions as a type of political action or political speech. Which is also interesting, since it was, you know, probably big moneyed Wall Street interests that first lobbied for, you know, for the spending of money to be treated under American law as protected political speech. And this is certainly the first time you've seen the, you know, that being turned in the other direction.
Right. And I think you're referring to Citizens United.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of people that are treating this like a protest movement. And comparing it to Occupy Wall Street, I think there's a lot of interesting parallels to be drawn there. I think that it's fascinating that, this is, if you want to occupy Wall Street, you occupy them where it's really going on, which is inside the markets. Like,
Right.
who gives a crap about actually standing around on the property outside their front doorstep? Get in their game. Hit them where they really are and where they really care about, which is in their balance sheet. Like, So not only is it entertaining, and like, man, the entertainment and narrative value of this whole event is just, there's a reason that you've already had like 6 different movie deals struck over this thing, and it's not even concluded yet.
Right. And I wanted to ask you, who do you think the key players are in this GameStop story so far? Whose story is this?
You've got, your key players have got to be deepfuckingvalue, the investor who made his YOLO bet on GameStop over a year ago and now is being hailed by the people of Wall Street Bets as like, the ultimate fortune teller, the guy who could see the future.
Right.
And it's another point about that I want to bring up, that it's easy to get confused about. Deepfuckingvalue is not the leader of Wall Street Bets. There is no leader of Wall Street Bets, and he never was trying to be a leader. He was never trying to be a symbol or an icon, although he really has become iconic with respect to these events. He was just a guy who thought that betting on being long on GameStop was a great idea, and that there was real potential for this company to pull off a turnaround.
He was actually, until the 28th of January, he was a financial wellness education director at Mass Mutual. Mass Mutual in Boston. And he resigned on the 21st and was employed through the 28th. But anyway.
Right. So, but he's walked away from that now, and he has, he's still riding most of his bet, at least the last that I saw him post, which was a couple of days ago. He had averaged out a little bit of profits on the way up, I think, pocketing about $15 million that he's, locked up. He can presumably retire on now. But the rest of that, which is the large majority of his position, is still a live position on GameStop.
So he's still in the game. He's still got skin in the game.
As far as I know, he still has almost all of his skin in the game. And I wouldn't expect that you're going to see him. I mean, I don't know what he's going to do, but it would surprise me a great deal if he exited his position before the congressional hearing, because that's going to, open him up to accusations that he was manipulating the stock upwards only so he could get out before everybody else. Mm-hmm. And he's, that's very contrary to his investing style, at least according to his YouTube channel. He's a long-term value investor and sees value in GameStop.
Yeah.
So he's one of the main players. Deepfuckingvalue is one of the main players. I think Ryan Cohen is certainly one of the main players here, because it's his actions coming in and driving from an investor standpoint, driving the case that the company needs to completely reimagining itself and succeeding. And I mean, it's fascinating to think about Ryan Cohen being added to the GameStop board, and then it triggers this chain of events in which GameStop's stock values just go higher than anybody would have ever imagined, except for the Wall Street Bets guys,
right?
who saw it in advance. So, I mean, if you're the the CEO of GameStop, and you've just appointed this guy and his two homies to your board of directors, and all of a sudden your stock just goes through the roof. I mean, what do you got to be thinking of? Like, who is this guy? Like, dude, you're magic. Like,
You're an
please
investment god. Yeah.
tell me what are we doing? Show me the way. Like, apparently everything you touch is gold. So tell me what we're doing.
Right.
And I think there's probably a lot of that going on behind closed doors in GameStop leadership right now.
Yeah.
And I presume that Ryan Cohen, that's a pretty heavy burden to fall on your shoulders to have this huge thing happen where you really better deliver on this transition, because you've got an army of retail investors the world over watching you and, wanting you to give us some good results here so that we, can be convinced that we were right in our case, that you were going to turn this company around. Well, it's on Ryan Cohen to pull that off now, but he's certainly a central player here. Obviously, you also have probably Gabe Plotkin and the short sellers at Melvin Capital and maybe some of their buddies at Citadel who gave them kicked them a couple of $1 billion to get out of the hole a couple of weeks ago.
Bailed them out. Yeah.
And then finally, probably Vlad Tenev. Is that his? Is it?
Vlad Tenev. Yeah, he is the founder of
CEO.
Robinhood. Yeah, founder and CEO of Robinhood.
So I'd say those are your primary players in this, and of course, the hordes of retail investors.
Right.
But I mean, and probably Janet Yellen also gets to be a major player.
She hasn't made yet. I guess she sort of has made her entrance now.
Yep.
Yes, she's made her entrance, but
she's come in the second act, and we will we will see.
Right. What role do you think lockdown, pandemic lockdown boredom played in this? Because there's a narrative being pushed out there right now that it's a bunch of guys on Wall Street Bets who are at home or out of work. They've got stimulus checks in their pockets. They've got this new, very entertaining, very addictive Robinhood app at their fingertips that has given them kind of a new level of accessibility to the market.
I don't think that's what's going on with GameStop. I do think that there's a lot of that going on in the market today, and that Robinhood has opened up a lot of retail traders just kind of using their money to, have fun on the market.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's what's going on with GameStop. I think what you have here is some guys who did some really good, serious research and, made it publicly available in these forums where lots of other people recognized this is really good research. This is a much more sophisticated look under the hood at what's going on with GameStop than your classic, 30-second short seller spiel about, GameStop's a failing business in malls. Like
that you would see on CNBC.
Right. And these guys were paying very close attention. Their research was excellent. And this is a point that's been made by a lot of people who have come to the defense of the investors from Wall Street Bets, guys like Chamath and
I forgot his name. Yeah.
And Mark Cuban. These guys have come out and said, Wall Street seriously underestimated the quality of research that some of these retail guys can do. And they've been underestimating these guys forever, but in the information age, these guys have access to sophisticated tools that regular guys never had access to before. And guess what? They're using them. And guess what? Like, you know, they can be a serious force to be reckoned with. There's a lot of smart people out there on the internet. And
Right.
the good stuff, that's the thing with Reddit. When you have something that's controlled entirely by people either upvoting it or downvoting it, like, the good stuff really can rise to the top.
Right.
And yeah, so I think that's a very interesting facet of this.
Many critics are saying that this situation, like you see a lot of people on television saying that this situation proves how disconnected the stock market is from any real world value. The media has characterized the GameStop trade as nothing more than like social media fueled hype, or a pump and dump, or even a Ponzi scheme at time. I've heard it called that. I mean, over the last couple of weeks, I've heard multiple analysts describe GameStop trade as lacking any investment fundamentals. And there's the famous quote from the famous short seller Michael Burry, the guy that made millions, if not maybe even billions, shorting the mortgage lending crisis. He's described the situation as unnatural, insane, and dangerous. But I wanted to ask you, as a current GameStop investor, do you think there actually were fundamentals present here?
Well, I think you have this. First of all, the fundamentals case for GameStop is, that first part of the thesis is that the over shorting here and the lack of attention paid to the potential of this company to reinvent itself means that its fundamental value is really a lot higher than where it was in the market. Now, and here's the thing is, the other part of this is the value of the stock. If we're talking about a free market here, the value of the stock just is whatever people are willing to pay for the stock. And people might have different ways that they come to their valuations of that stock. Traditional models look at things like the price of the stock compared to their earnings per share of the company, or the price of the stock compared to their sales numbers. There's all kinds of different models that you can use to value a company's stock. But no one is forced to use those models. And just because you think that those models are good models doesn't mean that somebody else has to use those models for their own personal valuations and for their own decisions about whether or not they want to own the company's stock. So if people like the stock and they want to buy it at that price, well, then so be it. That's their choice, and those decisions play into the market price just as much as everybody else's decisions do with those people's valuations of the stock and whether they're willing to buy or sell it at a particular price. Now, the federal government and the SEC don't take a very they probably take a different view on this than I do. They want you to only be buying and selling stock with respect to its value, whether or not that reflects the underlying value of the company from a perspective of whether that company will make money in the future and succeed as a business. But realistically, the SEC knows, as everyone does, that people that are buying and taking positions in stocks in the stock market are doing more than just that. They're also taking opportunities where they see that holding a stock can be strategic for one reason or another. Like, for example, that you notice that the stock has been allowed to be shorted to 140% of the float. And guess what? That makes me value holding that stock. If I think that's going to get short squeezed, then
Right.
I think I'm going to be able to sell this stock at a name my price situation in the future. And I believe that that thesis is correct. Then why shouldn't I be able to buy that stock at whatever price I want to buy it at? as long as there's a seller willing to make that same deal with me. So if the SEC is going to say that sort of thing shouldn't be done, well, it's like this gets done by everybody on Wall Street every day, and to pretend otherwise is totally naive and ridiculous.
Right.
And to use the idea that that's not how people should be buying or selling stocks, those aren't good reasons for them to be doing it. Well, one, you're unless you're going to be applying that same kind of enforcement of reasons on everyone equally, including the big players on Wall Street, which they're not going to be prepared to do, then let's have the same rules for everybody.
Right.
Which I think is going to be another big theme of how this all plays out, is this is really shown how the rules are not the same for retail investors as they are for the big guys on Wall Street.
Right.
And the second the guys on Wall Street are losing money to the retail guys, they pull out all the stops to do everything they can to change the rules on the fly and increase margin requirements, anything they can do to get out of their bad position that they would never let a retail investor get out of if the shoe was on the other foot.
I think that the GameStop situation is completely, obviously unprecedented, and it certainly caught these hedge funds completely unprepared. Melvin Capital lost 50% of its value, but one can imagine that the Gabe Plotniks of the world are going to do anything and everything they can to prevent this from ever happening again. Yet at the same time, many people are talking about how the world of investing now will never be the same, because communities of people on Reddit, Discord, and other platforms now have a much larger influence in the market. We can see that. What do you think the role social media is going to play kind of moving forward?
Well, there have been a lot of newcomers to Wall Street Bets over the past couple of weeks with the, huge media spotlight from all over the globe. And a lot of these people are looking for the next GameStop, or like, what's the next thing you're going to short squeeze? And you've also had, you've seen a bunch of other stocks alongside GameStop pushed as targets of the Reddit retail investors, like AMC and Nokia and BlackBerry and all this stuff. And mostly, I think all of those are being, that's a distraction. GameStop is in a unique position here, and it's the only one that I feel certain has made the people on the shorting side of this really bleed, financially speaking. And I don't think it's over. So there's not going to be a next GameStop. This is going to be a unique scenario. And furthermore, Wall Street Bets and any Reddit investing community, you're never going to see this happen again, because Wall Street is going to have their eye on every one of those subreddits forever. For never again will they be caught with their pants down like this. None of them will. Every hedge fund on Wall Street is going to have interns combing the threads of Reddit, Wall Street Bets, stocks, investing, every other investing related subreddit in that community is going to be watched for years to come, if not forever. Because that, let's face it, for those guys that got hit by this so far, and it's not over yet if you ask me, but just as things have gone so far, that was an expensive boo-boo that those guys made by leaving themselves open to this kind of a retail onslaught of Redditors who realized that these guys were vulnerable. And they're never going to allow a blind spot like that to exist again if they can help it. And that means that they're never going to be caught with their pants down by Reddit again. Maybe something in some other future social media platform that they don't really know about might be able to get them in a future position like this, but it won't be from Reddit.
So what makes Reddit or communities like that, other social media channels, what makes them then so dangerous?
Because they allow sort of organic communities to be built, communities in this case around investing ideas, and they allow users without being organized by some kind of leadership to naturally coalesce around certain strategies based on information that's becomes publicly information or publicly available to them. And you get big enough communities, and Wall Street Bets has ballooned in size over the past couple of weeks, but even before all of this happened, it was still like between 1 and 2 million members, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And you get people together in the millions and have them all put kick a few bucks in. Like, turns out it really can make a difference.
Right.
But it's also worth mentioning and worth remembering, if you're the retail investor, that even something like Wall Street Bets, like, we're still the little guy. We're the little mouse stealing the crumbs from under the table of these big boys playing, the fat cats playing at their table. And now the fat cats have seen us.
Right.
Which, in one sense, it's almost kind of, a real downside for Wall Street Bets. All this extra attention is because it's going to be a lot harder to make successful market plays when you've got the eyes of every fucking Wall Street firm, pardon my French, when you've got the eyes of every Wall Street firm looking at every move you're planning and every idea that you post, you lose your edge once they notice you.
Right.
But I do think you're not going to see an end to these kind of communities springing up and, flexing their muscles, so to speak, in the market. And it's been very instructive, I think, for all parties involved, what the true power of decentralized communities can bring in the future, and what technologies like social media, how those really can have enormous impacts on things like markets.
A big player in this is, we said earlier, is Robinhood. And, Robinhood's stated mission is to, quote, democratize finance for all. I think the company has succeeded in creating more accessibility to the market for the average retail investor. And yet many users of the app felt completely betrayed by Robinhood for restricting trades of GameStop, even going so far as to shut down the ability to buy GameStop stocks on January 28th. You could sell, but you couldn't buy. And when they did open it back up the next day under, I believe it was SEC scrutiny or congressional scrutiny, they limited the amount of shares a retail investor could buy at that time. I wanted to ask you how you think Robinhood could have handled that situation differently.
Well, I do think it's correct to, you do have to give Robinhood credit where credit's due. And as far as giving the average retail investor, or even, prospective retail investor, unprecedented access to markets by just being able to trade stocks through an app on your phone and do it commission free, that these guys really did a huge service to retail investors. And they changed the game. I mean, there wouldn't be commission-free trading for retail investors if it weren't for Robinhood. Now every brokerage offers it because they had to compete with Robinhood taking all their business. And so now, thanks to Robinhood, it's industry standard that we have commission-free trading, which is a great thing for retail because it means that you're not priced out of getting involved because of high trading fees. So good on them for that. And whether or not how serious they are about their mission for opening things up for retail investors, I'm not going to speculate on that, but I will say that their decision to limit the buying of shares on the retail side of GameStop in particular was a disastrous idea from a PR perspective. Mm-hmm. I mean, and if your name is Robinhood, if the name of your app is Robinhood, that you're going to allow the little guy to steal from the rich guy and get what's rightfully his, or whatever the sort of Robinhood myth that's supposed to be behind this is. And these guys then, when it's clear that it's gone viral and all these retail investors are piling into GameStop to force a short squeeze, and it looks like they're just about on the verge of triggering it, and all of a sudden Robinhood comes out and says, well, we had to halt the trading on that stock. And by halt the trading, I mean you guys can still sell, but you can't buy. We had to only stop buy trading of this. Well, look, every transaction has a buyer and a seller. So if I'm still allowed to sell, that means somebody somewhere is still being allowed to buy. But it's not me. So whatever your agreement was to get out of the massive capital requirements you were going to have to take on, when you make a move like this that makes it look like you are stopping the retail investors from buying a stock that they want to buy at market price because it's going to hurt other Wall Street firms, in particular a Wall Street firm that recently bailed out the most prominent short sellers of the stock.
So you're talking about Citadel.
I'm talking about Citadel bankrolling Melvin Capital, them being the most prominent short sellers of the stock. Citadel is also they're Robinhood's biggest customer, in that I believe something like 40% of their income comes from what Citadel pays them for their order flow.
For the order flow. That's correct.
And there's nothing necessarily super nefarious about that. Something that we maybe want to look into, but somebody has to place these orders into the market, and they're going to get their eyes on them first when that happens. But when most retailers don't know about that, and then it looks like you're shutting down the buying to save your biggest customer who pays you more than anybody else. And what do they pay you for? They pay you to get the information of the retail sellers and buyers placing their orders on the market so that they can have a kind of informational advantage and an upper hand in the market. And that these guys are now caught with their pants down, and you're doing this to save their butt when it's being held to the flames at the expense of treating your retail investor fairly. Whether or not that's true, to allow a narrative like that to so obviously develop, I mean, and it's such an obvious conclusion to draw from those events that, it's no wonder that the retail users of Robinhood are running for the hills now. Fidelity's new accounts over the last weekend was up like 700%.
Really?
For new account signups from all these people running from Robinhood to go to a broker that they can be confident is not going to limit their ability to buy shares of the stock that they want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And Robinhood forgot that their number one rule is you're dealing with people's money, and their people are entrusting you with their money. And if they don't trust that you're not going to change the rules of the game in the middle of the game, then people are right to have zero confidence that their money is safe with you. I'm transferring all. I had a Robinhood account too, and guess what? I'm moving to a different broker now. And that's for that same reason that I'm not convinced that Robinhood is not going to try to pull strings and bend or break rules when it comes to my money, because they don't have enough cash flow on their balance sheet. So
and that's sort of like I would say the most kind of best case scenario explanation is it's really palpable. But
as you mentioned to me earlier in our pre-show talk, that these guys are basically not Robin Hood, but the sheriff of Nottingham.
They're the sheriff of Nottingham. But it's a tragic story in a way. I mean, if we want to look at it as a myth, it's a tragic story because, like, I feel like they could have had one of these transcendent moments. And, Tenev is saying he had a gun to his head, and, that could be true. And I don't want to, but what if in that moment he said, no, I'm not shutting down buying. I'm
not shutting down buying. I'm not doing this because if I do this, it's going to destroy my business.
Exactly.
That's what he should have said. He should have recognized that.
Yeah, and I think that he had a moment. Also, it's this fascinating moment. It's a fascinating moment because it's the moment where, holy cow, man, your business just started, is really a major player in an almost revolutionary moment that is directly tied into your core value as a company, like the stated mission of the company. It's working. It's working. Yeah. This is succeeding. What you said you wanted to do,
you're doing it.
It's happening, and it's happening on a scale. I think maybe the problem here was it happened so quickly and on a scale that he was not prepared for. And instead of it's a classic story. It's instead of standing, a classic tragedy, instead of standing and sort of, maybe it was a moment where he was called upon to kind of take a heroic stance, and that would have made his business legendary moving into the future. He caved. And again, I don't want to sit here and rip on Vlad Tenev. He keeps saying, I've heard him say in multiple interviews, they called me at 3:00 in the morning and said I owed $3 billion. It's nobody wants to get a phone call with that. And I do appreciate that he says that he was, awoken in the middle of the night at 3:00 in the morning. I think he's signaling guys, I wasn't thinking clearly, he was overwhelmed.
I think they had me by the balls.
Yeah, but it's almost like watching somebody get everything they wanted and then just being terrified by it and scared and throwing it away.
Well, I don't doubt that he had a lot of pressure on him to stop the buying. And could he have stopped the buying? Maybe. Could he have done something else? Maybe. It's tough to say. But what I do know is that what he did do will probably, in my estimation, I do not have high hopes for the success of Robinhood as a brokerage platform going forward. Mm-hmm. And this is a little bit, unfortunately, time for them, given that they have a upcoming IPO, I think, in the next year. I don't think you're going to find that there's going to be a lot of retail investors with a positive view of your company going toward your IPO, Robinhood. But, hey, live and learn, right?
Right.
There was a point that we didn't really get to when I was talking about the culture of Wall Street bets that I wanted to make sure I mentioned, which is that you have these guys, you have these Wall Street bets guys with this insane risk tolerance. And if you're thinking about trying to execute a short squeeze play like this, it's very difficult to do if you're not like a single organized unit, right? Or like a big hedge fund, or a big single actor, or at least a big team of investors trying to short squeeze a very, very small company's shorted stock. Even GameStop, which wasn't trading at that expensive, is still big enough that, like, for retail to try to do this, just kind of coalescing around a few ideas posted on a public message board is, I mean, it's a big ask, because what you're talking about is a global multi-million player version of the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma, for those who may not have heard of it, is a description of a game situation where it's typically described with two different players. Each player can either defect or cooperate, and the payout structure of the game is set up such that both players do better for themselves if they defect. Whether the other player defects or cooperate, either way, you do better for yourself by defecting. And so typically both players defect, and they end up with an outcome that is much, much worse for both of them than if they had both cooperated.
Right.
But because of the structure of the payoffs of the outcomes, their rational decision making forces them into the double defect outcome square, and everybody loses. But so to be able to play this game, you need these guys who need to come together to be able to risk all this capital that they're putting with their infinite risk appetite. But the play also has to be very, very simple, so that, like, you don't have to be some kind of super genius to execute this, that even your grandma could do this if she gets the instructions. And fortunately for the short squeeze, the best way to make it happen is just to get people to buy and hold it. And this culture is so perfect for it, because you have these guys that are so used to completely irresponsibly irrational behavior, like YOLOing $1 million of their savings into a single stock bet or something like that. Like, these are the guys you need if you're going to play a giant prisoner's dilemma game. You need to be able to count on the fact that they can commit to acting irrationally and really follow through on those commitments. And it's kind of it's a genius strategic point about this. And the other thing is, you're going to have to completely expect that Wall Street's going to come back at you with every trick in the book to try to trick you into selling your shares, and to make you sell them off so that they can get off the hook cheaper. And so if you're going to commit to this play, you really need to turn your brain off like you're a total retard, pardon the language. But in the parlance of Wall Street bets, that's an advantage for you if you're going into this kind of a fight. You need to just be able to completely ignore all of these reasons that you need to sell and hold it, because that's what will punish the short sellers and hopefully eventually make them lose so much money paying interest in their short positions that eventually they're forced to capitulate and the stock gets squeezed. And then all the people holding it will get to sell off to people closing their short positions. The short positions are the bag holders. The everyday retail investors get to walk away with huge profits. And it's a beautiful Cinderella story for GameStop and retail investors everywhere. That's the outcome that I think we'd all like to see. I think that's the outcome Hollywood would like to see for the ending to all the movies that they've just been contracting for. But, who knows how it will play out at the end.
What do you think the GameStop trade has taught us about risk? What has it taught you about risk?
Well, I think it serves as a really nice example of the fact that all the time we shoulder risk of possible outcomes that the chance that outcome actually obtains is very, very, very small, like only a tiny fraction of 1%. But if that outcome does obtain, it carries with it catastrophic consequences that you absolutely do not want to shoulder under any circumstances. There are a lot of problems that you can describe this way. A lot of them will be, familiar from, recent news cycles. You could talk about pandemics as this kind of a risk, right? Like the chance that a pandemic is going to suddenly come out of nowhere and ravage the globe at any given moment is very small, that it's going to happen right now. But on a long enough time scale, these very small risks do come to pass eventually. And when they do, they carry the consequences with them that, we can expect that they were going to carry all along. And if we're not prepared for them, it can be utterly devastating. There were a lot of people raising alarms about global pandemics long before coronavirus came around, going back to George W. Bush's administration. And he actually took that really seriously and took a lot of steps to create some preparedness for that, which was further bolstered by the Obama administration. But when Donald Trump came into the White House, they pulled all those protections out and cut positions and said, we'll hire these guys back again if we need them at the time. And we've all seen the consequences of the unprepared situation that the United States was in when the coronavirus pandemic hit. But there's lots of other problems too. Climate change can be thought about this way, that there's, massive risks of big climate events that, we are shouldering all the time that we don't pay much attention to, but they can devastate us. Also, I think one that doesn't get our attention very often or very much, but should get a lot more of our attention, is artificial intelligence research. And, that's the kind of thing that the project to move towards creating an artificial general intelligence, that is to say, an artificial intelligence that's capable of having all of the, that can do everything that human beings can do with our rich mental lives. Once we make an artificial intelligence of that level, well, it has a very extreme possibility to rapidly advance and snowball very fast into something that's very quickly beyond our ability to control or even understand. And we probably only get one shot at that. And if we do it wrong, it could have catastrophic consequences for each and every human being alive on Earth. And I don't want to sound alarmist, but when I say catastrophic consequences, I mean up to and including fatal for everyone.
Right.
And we're starting to see these risks being taken more seriously. You have guys like Nick Bostrom at the Future of Life Institute at Oxford University. If you don't know who Nick Bostrom is, go look into this guy and check out the papers that he writes. In fact, a lot of I'm pretty certain that a lot of the things that Elon Musk is concerned about and the problems he's trying to address, that he has drawn a lot of inspiration from Nick Bostrom's work. You also have in the budget that was recently passed in the defense spending, just this last December, there was a big section of that was put towards developing AI safety regulations and projects in the defense budget, which is a promising sign, since I think that, you know, these are really national and global security issues. And the lesson from GameStop that I would like people to take home from is these guys on Wall Street got caught with their pants down, taking an enormous amount of risk. They put themselves in a position where they might still yet be forced to pay whatever the market demands in price for the shares that they borrowed. And there's no upper limit cap on that, theoretically speaking. If it gets high enough, it could destroy the entire economy. I don't think that will happen, probably. I think somebody will step in to prevent that from happening in some way. But the point is, these guys open themselves up to catastrophic risk, even if it was at a very small probability of obtaining. But if you do that, you're playing with fire and you're going to get burned. And we need to understand that, especially as we move forward into the future with more and more powerful technologies that can have serious consequences that may be undoable, that we need to proceed very carefully. And we need to make sure that, to whatever extent we can, we are doing things in ways that don't open us up to catastrophic risks.
To infinite loss.
To infinite loss kinds of situations. Absolutely.
Which technically, kind of to piggyback on what you just said, and or to clarify, this situation is a potential infinite loss situation, because in a short situation, when the value, there is no limit to what a value,
right? I mean,
how high a value can go.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever the order book says. If a short squeeze gets squeezed, then, you know, they immediately have to start buying up the shares at whatever they're on offer at market. And once those shares getting up, if this squeeze is really squeezing hard, you get a lot of buyers just piling into the market, eating up whatever the listed prices in the order book are. And, you know, it's one thing for that to happen and just eat up all the prices in the order book. It's another thing when people are expecting this to happen and know that you're going to pay them whatever they ask for, especially when there's so many shorts that literally they're going to have to buy every share that's out there and then some more if the short percentage really is that high. And again, we don't have exact data on where that short percentage is right now. We'll know more on Tuesday about how things were back on the 29th. But, you know, real-time data on that is virtually impossible to get your hands on. There's estimates, but nothing that's the cold hard numbers. But when people know that their orders, or expect that their orders, are going to be filled at whatever price they set, I mean, then you have a real dangerous possibility of people setting economy breaking prices, and like weird things could happen, like GameStop becomes the world's first quadrillion dollar company by market cap for a few minutes or something like that. Just weird stuff that you don't want to be happening in normal markets. And hopefully this whole situation will inspire regulators to reform. Not, and I think that there's a lot of danger about regulators wanting to come in and babysit retail investors and put restrictions on what they can do in the markets. No, that would be deeply wrong. What needs to be fixed in the markets is not what retail investors are able to do or not, but whether or not people should be able to short sell stocks at those levels which can rightly lead people to believe that they can name any price they want and have it met by a short seller getting squeezed. Focus the reforms there. Let's reform the short selling rules to something a little more reasonable, and something that puts a cap on the obvious greed of exploitative short sellers that just want to like drive companies' values into bankruptcy and profit the whole way down as they destroy that company. Like that needs to be curtailed in the humble opinion of this one retail investor.
I feel like 2020 in particular really kind of, with the pandemic, kind of marked the final sort of death, let's say, of the 20th century. And this is one of those historical moments that I think is just so unmistakably 21st century. I mean, there's the age-old human traits here of greed and you know, risk and revolution and you know, those kinds of you have the class warfare aspect to this that's going on, but it's sort of the platforms where these age-old battles are being fought has changed now, and it will never be the same anymore.
There truly are a lot of really fascinating angles on this. It's so multifaceted, and there's so many cool things to talk about. And I guess, you know, time will tell as to what kind of a impact this ultimately has historically. But, you know, and it's always kind of hard to judge those things while they're still happening. But to me, it feels like this really might be a watershed moment. And like, there's so much about this that's truly unique and truly groundbreaking for retail investors to profit at the expense of professional Wall Street investing firms is at this scale, it's completely unheard of. And it's probably Kathy Wood called it the biggest intergenerational transfer of wealth in history. I think it's probably also the biggest transfer of wealth in social strata, from the wealthy down to the poor and middle classes. Probably the greatest one of those in American history too. And if that turns out to be the case, then even if the squeeze never gets squoze, for those of us who contend that they don't believe that there really has been a true short squeeze here, even if that never comes to pass, this still will have made such a mark and an impact in the future of the American economy that I really think you're looking at a real historical event here. It's gonna be a big one that we're gonna see, feel, and talk about, and write about, and study the impacts of for many, many, many years to come.
Well, Justin, thank you so much.
Pleasure's all mine.
I think I'd like to actually have a follow-up with you episode maybe after the congressional hearings on the 18th, and we can kind of look at what happens at that point.
Mike, as you know, we've had a lot of really interesting conversations over the years, and I am more than happy to have one with you at any future point which you would like.
All right. Well, Justin, again, thank you so much for coming on this evening. Everyone, you've been listening to Interview Time.